In a survey given to adults over the age of 21, the following question was asked: what is your biggest fear? Almost unanimously, they said our biggest fear is death. Surprisingly, under the age of 21, it was the death of our parents. Death is something that comes to each and every one of us. The question has always been asked since time began. Why were we put on the earth? Just but to die. The answer is, you fill in the blank. The Christian answer is, we were put on this earth to serve God and to further God's kingdom. Someone else might say it's to keep the species called humanity going. But death is something that has touched already each and every one of us in here tonight. We all know of a loved one that has passed on. The older one gets, we realize that every day is another day closer to death. We don't want to talk about death. Insurance salesmen say that trying to sell life insurance is almost impossible. I had a man in the church that made his living selling cemetery plots. He said you talk to somebody and as soon as they realize what you're doing, they're not interested or they want you to leave. But yet death is something that we all must face unless Christ returns in our time. Good Friday is a day of death. Let us stand for the call to worship. What's happened? Why are you here at Plateau United Methodist Church?
We have come because they have crucified our Lord.
Who has crucified your Lord?
The soldiers at Pilate's command.
But I heard you yell, crucify him, in the awful silence of your souls.
All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his or her own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquities of us all.
Our opening hymn is number 289.
Trust me.
Let us join in this litany of remembrance. Let us remember Jesus, who though he was rich, yet for our sake became poor and dwelt among us, who was content to be subject to his parents, who lived and toiled for nearly 30 years in the common life.
May this mind be in us that was in Jesus Christ.
Let us remember Jesus, who healed the sick, who is Master and Lord and also friend.
May this mind be in us that was in Jesus Christ.
Let us remember Jesus, who prayed for his disciples, who prayed for forgiveness for those who persecuted him, who prayed for those who received him.
May this mind be in us that was in Jesus Christ.
Let us remember Jesus, who believed in men and did not lose heart, who disregarded his own comfort for another, who humbled himself and became obedient even unto death, even death on the cross.
May this mind be in us that was in Jesus Christ. May we have the mind of Christ. Amen.
On Good Friday, most of the time the scripture deals with the actual crucifixion or Jesus' last 7 words on the cross or the burial. But tonight, we've heard the story so many times. But let's look at another aspect of the Good Friday story. And that is of Pontius Pilate, portrayed so brilliantly and beautifully by Wayne just a few moments ago. Our scripture comes from the 27th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, beginning with the 11th verse. And Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, saying, Art thou the King of the Jews? And Jesus said unto him, Thou sayest. And when he was accused of the chief priests and elders, he answered nothing. Then said Pilate unto him, Hearest thou not how many things they witness against thee? And he answered him to never a word, insomuch that the governor was greatly surprised. Now at that feast the governor was wont to release unto the people a prisoner, whom they would. And they had then a notable prisoner called Barabbas. Therefore, when they were gathered together, Pilate said unto him, Whom will that I release unto you, Barabbas or Jesus, which is called Christ? For he knew that for envy they had delivered him. When he sat down to the judgment seat, his wife said unto him, saying, Have thou nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things this day in a dream because of him. But the chief priests and elders persuaded the multitude that they should ask Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor answered and said unto them, Whether of the twain we did I release unto you? And they said, Barabbas. Pilate saith unto them, What shall I do then with Jesus, which is called Christ? They all say unto him, Let him be crucified. And the governor said, Why? What evil has he done? But they cried out the more, saying, Let him be crucified. When Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, but that rather a tumult was made, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See to it. Then answered all the people and said, His blood be on us and on our children. Even though I've read those words dozens of times, every time I read them, it gives me cold chills up and down my back. Let us bow. Almighty God, we know what took place this day so long ago. Anoint us with the Holy Spirit, that we may remember all that we have seen and heard here tonight. Now may the words of my mouth, meditation of my heart be acceptable to you. May they be guided by you in Christ's holy name. Amen. One of the advantages of going to a seminary is that, especially Duke, they have a huge theological library. I spent many an hour in that library looking up things, reading things, and I became fascinated with Pontius Pilate. And the question I put before you tonight, was he a monster or a pawn? Judea, the Roman province of Judea, actually included Samaria and a little known area called I-M-U-D-U-I-A. That's the best I can do. It was considered the armpit of the Roman Empire. To be posted there was a punishment. To be sent there was considered a disgrace because it was a troubled area. Time after time, since the Romans occupied it, there was rebellion. There was assassination. There was trouble. There was rabble-rousers. There were revolutionaries. It has been compared in modern-day history to the resistance of the French in World War II. Attacks made at any time, in any place, on Roman soldiers or officials. Pilate lived in Rome. He was of noble bearing. He was considered a knight of his time. He married into society. Wife's name was Claudia. And Emperor Tiberius called him into his chambers and said, "Look, I've sent 5 governors to this place. They've all failed to keep the law and order. I'm sending you." Pilate arrived with 3,000 men. He set up his headquarters in Caesarea. And he felt like he had to rule with an iron hand. He was going to whip this place into shape any way he could. Some say he was cruel. Some historians of the time wrote that he was unjust. And others said that he was just carrying out his orders. But he ruled with an iron fist. He had to. In all 4 Gospels, we don't hear much of it. But what we do hear is the trials of the Christ and how he presided over them. He ruled there from AD 26 to AD 36, which means in that 10-year span, he ruled the entire time of John the Baptist and of Jesus the Christ. Normally, a governor only ruled a province for 1 to 3 years. So by him being there 10 years, had to say something about his leadership and his high standing in Rome. He was confronted with a problem. Here was a man brought to him, and all 4 Gospels portrayed Pilate as wanting to set him free. Wanting to set him free. He said, "I find no fault with this man." In the first trial, when he came before Pilate, he said, "Oh, you're Galilean. You belong to Herod." So he sent him over to Herod. Herod was afraid to do anything, so he sent him back to Pilate. Pilate wanted no part of the Christ. Pilate had enough problems. His wife said words, said, "Look, leave this man alone. He's done nothing wrong. I've had a dream, and don't do it." And Pilate was we see the picture. Pilate he says to Christ, he says, why are you here? Well, what do they say? Jesus doesn't say anything in Matthew's account of it. He said, what? The chief priest said, oh, well, he says he's the king. He said, are you king? Jesus said, who do you say that I am? Pilate didn't have no answer for that. He didn't know. He was just going on what they said. Pilate, if we read the account in the other Gospels, Pilate was perfectly content to send him off to be whipped and beat up a little bit and turn him loose. That was just punishment. The chief priest, though, they wouldn't hear that. As custom with the Passover, that Pilate, the governor, could release one man, one prisoner. So he looks in his dungeon and he finds the wickedest, most vilest prisoner he had, Barabbas. A man who had stolen from his own people, a man who had murdered fellow Jews, a man who was a career criminal, the worst of the worst. And we can figure that Pilate said, thinking, well, I'll offer this criminal, and surely they'll choose this Christ instead of this rabble, instead of this murderer. So he hauls him up. And he says, which one? This criminal or this man? And I can't find anything wrong with him. Chief priest. They made the crowd yell, give us Barabbas. And you know, in any crowd situation, it only takes just one or two to start yelling the loudest for suddenly everybody to just join right in, or most everybody. So the crowd will yell, give us Barabbas. Give us Barabbas. Pilate still can't believe it. He said, well, what do you want me to do then with the Christ? Then the chief priest again said, they yelled the loudest. Who yells the loudest makes the most noise. The rest of them just follow along like blind sheep. Said, crucify him. Crucify him. The choir portrayed that so beautifully. Crucify him. Crucify him. Pilate couldn't believe his ears. He just couldn't believe it. We see then Pilate calling for a bowl of water and a towel. He said, I'm washing my hands of this. This man is innocent. I'm not going to have anything to do with his death. Do it yourselves. Pilate, if we read the other gospel accounts, was all set to turn him loose anyway. But then the chief priest slapped up to Pilate and said, Pontius, old boy, it's like this. He says he's king. But we only have one king, Caesar. So what do you think Caesar would say if we tell him that there's a man here claiming to be the king and you let him go? Pontius Pilate knew right away if word of that got back to Rome, he'd be recalled home to Rome, and more than likely he would be executed or disgraced or exiled. And like anybody else, except for the Christ, Pilate's number one concern was Pontius Pilate. That was the ace in the hole that the chief priest used against the Christ. Pilate knew he had no choice. Pilate wouldn't even been involved except by Roman law. The governor was the only one that could pass a death sentence. And even then he said, well, See to it yourselves. Which gave them permission. Pilate, not much is known about him after that. There are some early historians, such as Josephus, and then in the 2nd century, Origen. They wrote about him. There were some Roman historians that also wrote about Pontius Pilate. There's a lot of mystery surrounding his death. Some say it occurred in AD 36, others say AD 39. Some say that he was ordered by Emperor at the time, Caligula, to commit suicide or be executed. For Pilate, they wrote, was never quite right after this, after the crucifixion of Christ. There was an uprising in Samaria, and Pilate ordered everyone involved to be killed. There was a little battle fought. Those that survived the battle on the Jewish side were executed. Word got back to Caesar, who recalled Pilate back to Rome to answer for that, because that was a crime under Roman law. And here the picture gets fuzzy. Did Caligula order him to commit suicide or be executed? Don't know. Other writings say that Pilate was banished from Rome and couldn't live with himself anymore and committed suicide. Others say he just disappeared. There is a tomb in Germany called Pilate's tomb. But then the picture gets even more strange. Pilate, because of his reluctance to murder the Christ, in the church, in the Abyssinian church, he was actually made a saint. There was a belief that Pilate became a Christian toward the end. And they made a saint out of him. And on June 25th is his celebrated feast day. His wife, Claudia, became a Christian. And the Greek Orthodox Church venerated her, and her feast day was October 27th. But regardless, was Pilate a monster or just a pawn that the Jews used? That debate is still being debated in some circles today, not much anymore. You can find a few books written on the subject, but they don't tell you too much. But Pilate was a troubled man after the crucifixion of Christ. And that troubles him, led him to his ultimate death. Today, how many out there are still pondering this whole situation? How many today, people, good people, smart people, are wandering around saying that Jesus' death never happened? That it was all a fantastic lie. When you're dead, you're dead. If we read the resurrection stories, we know that chief priest paid the guards to go and say, well, his followers came and stole him while we were asleep. That is just malarkey, because if a Roman soldier, a centuries, fell asleep and went back and told his centurion that, hey, I fell asleep and they came and stole the person's body out of the garden, how long do you think they would live? Not long at all. The centurion would have him executed on the spot. But yet the scriptures say, and the Jews still believe in this today. And they still believe it today, 2,000 years later. people now, smart, good, highly educated people, that still question this whole thing. That the event of Good Friday was just about a prophet that was executed for treason. That his followers stole the body. They don't believe in the resurrection. When I read this account, the line that bothers me most is the last one that I shared with you. Then after all the people had said, his blood be on us and on our children. I read a book years ago. I can't think of the title now. But it said that all of the Jews' problems ever since then, including the Holocaust during World War II, was punishment for that line right there. Let his blood be on us and on our children. Think about Jewish history. How for centuries they were persecuted. They didn't even have a country of their own until 1947. And look at Israel since then. They've been involved in 3 major wars. It's still hardly a month goes by that you don't read about a terrorist attack somewhere in the country. Armies are massing on their borders. They exchange rocket fire, gunfire, almost on a daily basis between Israel and their neighbors. Is this, as a result of this, what, let our blood be on us and on our children? And children's children, and children's children, and so on and so forth. Who knows? Where do you and I fit into all of this? One word, faith. We have faith that this happened just as it is recorded in the Gospels. That Jesus Christ died for the sins of the world, for my sins, for your sins, for the sins of all time. Jesus the Christ was innocent, but yet he suffered for us all. Now comes the other part of the equation. And here's where it really gets mind-boggling. God sent Jesus to the earth to die. Pilate could have said, I don't care what you say. This man is innocent. I'll beat him up and I'll let him go. And I'll deal with Rome myself. If he had done that, would there have been a crucifixion? Would there have been a death? Would there have been a burial? Would there have been a resurrection? Would we be celebrating Easter Sunday? Therefore, was Pilate the monster of all time? Or was he just a pawn that was used to bring about God the Father's will for his Son? You can find books written on that subject also if you dig deep enough. There's no conclusive answer. All of those books that I've read, they usually have one conclusion. It's up to the individual reader. But this we do know. Christ died for you and for me. The Easter story is a story that resounds all through the centuries and will continue until Christ himself returns to claim the earth once again. Christ made it possible for all who believe to enter into heaven. Christ made it possible that death is not just a hole in the ground, or in a vase, or a jar, or a box, sitting in the closet, or on a mantle. Christ died so you and I would live forever. We know that. We know it happened because of our faith. Last night I said if one word could be used to describe Monday, Thursday, it would be love. If I could use one word to describe what happened on this Good Friday so long ago, that word would be love. On Sunday morning, that word would be victory. Victory. That's why Paul wrote to the church in Corinth as part of the funeral liturgy, "O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting?" It's gone. Gone. Replaced by visions of heaven in all of its glories. Were the Jews punished on account of what they had done? That's up to you. Was Pontius Pilate, or Pontius Pilate, however you prefer to pronounce it, was he a monster or a pawn? Incidentally, on a side note, Pontius was a fairly common name in Rome. But after the fall of Rome, and the Christians took it over, that name disappeared from history. When I was growing up, Troy, like most northern cities, had its ethnic sections. Troy had a little place called Little Italy. I knew some of the children there, went to school with some of them. They never mentioned the word Pontius. Luigi, oh yeah, by the dozen. Francisco, oh yeah, several of them. But no Pontius. The name just disappeared from history. We all have to make our decisions. We all, if we want to enter into the debate that's still going on around this stuff, that's up to us. But the one thing stands above all. Christ died. We say it in communion most of the time. Christ died, Christ arose, and Christ will come again. But in order for him to come again, he had to leave. Good Friday is a reminder of his death. Tony said this afternoon at the Fred T. 14 Citizen Service, he said, we'd like to go from Monday, Thursday to the joys of Easter Sunday and bypass Good Friday. But we can't. We have to travel through the horrible, horrific events of Good Friday to arrive at Easter Sunday morning. Pontius Pilate. Monster or pawn? How strong is your faith and my faith? Do we really and truly believe that all of this happened? I hope that if any one of us were asked that question, we could say with a resounding, without even thinking about it, yes, it happened. Christ died for me, and I want to shout it and tell the world. Christ died for me, and I want to shout it and tell it to all the world. It did happen. God's plan for his Son came true. We leave here and we will pass by the Good Friday feelings of death and sorrow. We leave his disciples huddled together for their lives in locked rooms behind locked doors and sealed windows. And they, like us, await the glorious resurrection on Easter Sunday morning. He died that we may live. Praise be to God. Amen. Our closing hymn is number 286. Let us join in the dismissal. Let us go into the world appreciating the death of one man, no matter how small.
Let us go into the world, remembering the value of life and the meaning of death.
Let us go into the world in which we care.
Let us go into the world with hope.
Let us go into the world with love and peace.
Amen.
Go in peace, love, and comfort. Amen.